Hello and welcome to this session in which we'll keep working with preventive controls when it comes to cybersecurity. Another group of preventive controls are called access control, controls that's gonna give you access or limit your access to certain information. So the security measures that organization uses to make sure that only authorized employee, only authorized individual can access certain information or areas. This is what access control, limiting the access control. And access control can come in various forms and various methods. We could have discretionary access control. We could have role-based access control. We could have rule-based access control. So notice the difference between role-based and rule-based is only one letter. And we'll discuss each one of those in details in this session. We could have a policy-based access control and risk adaptive access control. We're also going to discuss briefly access control list or ACL or ACLs. Each of these controls plays a crucial role in safeguarding sensitive data and preventing unauthorized access. So what we will do is we look at each one of them separately, discussing what does it entail and what you need to know for the CPA exam. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today. Starting with discretionary access control, or known as DAC. DAC access control is characterized by its flexibility and autonomy. What do we mean by autonomy? Autonomy means the owner of the data, the creator of the data, or the person that's in charge of the resource, they will decide who gets access to their files or system. So these individuals have the authority to determine how the resources are shared because they're the owner. Who do they want to share it with and under what conditions? They could also assign different conditions, different permissions directly, change security settings for other users, and modify access rules as they see fit. Who can do that? The owners or the creators of this data. An example of that will be, let's assume we have a document on a shared file. Under a DAC system, the owner of the document can directly control who has the ability to read this document, edit, or share this document. So think of Google document, that's the best way. You might allow certain colleagues to view and edit the document while restricting access to others, or you might delegate responsibility of managing access to another trusted colleague. Again, if you're familiar with Google document, it's a good example where you can allow share, you can allow edit, or just view only. Now this is DAC, discretionary. We also have, since we have discretionary, we're going to have mandatory access control, MAC. Mandatory access control, they are more rigid and centralized. They are given by the administrator of the system. So rather than allowing individual users to set their permission, a MAC system enforces access policy at the whole organization level determined by the administrator, by the admin. These rules are not discretionary and apply across the board based on predefined policies that categorize all users and data into different level of security. So once we apply this level of security, it applies to all the users that deals with this data. Or once we apply the sensitivity of the data on this data, it applies to all. So an example of MAC could be found in a government or military setting where information is classified at different levels like confidential, secret, top secret. So somebody who has access to the secret document cannot give it to someone else because they can't do that. Although they might own it or they are working with it, but they don't have this discretionary. It's a mandatory access control. So a user access to documents is determined by their clearance level at the government level and the classification assigned to the document, not personal discretion or ownership. So that's DAC and MAC. Then we have role-based access control. And role is what? Based on your role. What is your role in the organization? Based on that, you might have access to certain data, to certain resources. So role-based approach is an approach managing system access that assigns permission based on the user's role within the organization rather than assigning permission to the individual directly. So it's based on your title, role, job function. This method groups job roles access into categories, each with a defined set of access rights. So if you belong to this group of role, then you have certain access. Likewise, as an employee changes their role within the company, their access privilege are automatically updated to reflect the permission associated with their new role. So let's assume you were promoted or demoted. This is what happened. For example, in a hospital setting, if we're using role-based access system, we might categorize roles such as nurses, doctors, and administrative staff as 3 different roles. So each category would have access rights suitable for their job functions. For example, nurses might have access to patient health record, but not the financial system. Doctors will have broader access to medical record, and administrator might have both patient billing and staff scheduling system, but not detailed medical record. So if a nurse is promoted to a nurse manager, her access right would be updated to include maybe additional administrative functions reflecting her new role. So this system streamifies the process of managing access right, ensuring individuals have access to the necessary resources to do what? To perform their job functions while maintaining security control. So this is role-based. Now we have rule with a U, rule-based access control. Rule-based access control operate on a set of predefined policies, rules, that determine access right not based on the user's job, but on the specific condition or criteria set for access. Based on this rule, you have access or not. So this system is overseen by administrators who establishes the rules which then apply universally across the system. So when a user attempts to access a resource, the system evaluates the request against the established rules to decide if they should give them access or deny access. And this system is highly effective for controlling access based on situational or environmental condition. What do we mean by that? Let's assume we have a rule-based access control for building security system. And let's imagine for a minute, we only allow access to the server room between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So when an employee tries to use their access card to enter the server room, the system checks the current time and day. Let's assume they want to do it on Saturday. If it's within the allowed time frame, access is granted. If it's not within the time frame, guess what? On weekend or after 5 p.m. or before 9 a.m., access is denied, regardless of the employee role. It has nothing to do with the employee role. It's based on the rule, which is 9 to 5 weekdays. So this system ensures that access is managed according to specific operational requirement or security policies, making it more secure. Let's talk about policy-based access control. Well, this is an advanced approach managing access right, integrating both role of the user and comprehensive policies that include various rules and conditions. So it's rules, conditions, roles, all combined together. Unlike a simpler system that relies on a fixed rules or roles, remember we have RBAC with an U, RBAC with a O, rules and roles. The policy dynamically evaluate access permission based on a wide array of factors related to the user. We would look at their identity, we would look at the role within the organization, we would look at their security clearance. So you could have a person with the same role but different security clearance. How are they accessing the system and what's their need for the access and any potential risk associated with granting the access? So this is basically a smart system. This multifaceted evaluation allowed the policy base to adjust permission in real time, providing a highly flexible and adaptive access control system. So it's not based on the role, because two people with the same role would need different access. Not based on rules. Maybe the same rules don't apply to the same individual. It's a mix of rules and roles. And we'll just kind of look at an example to kind of illustrate the concept. So it's more flexible than the rule and the role-based because it takes into account conditions. Again, this is for what purpose? Why do we have policy-based? if the company is growing, if the company is scaling, and we need a more flexible, smart system to allow access in real time, a policy-based will be better. What could be an example? Let's assume we have a global company called, XYZ, with employees in various departments, roles, and level of clearance working across multiple time zones. A policy-based system would allow an employee from a research department access certain classified data if they are within the company's secured network. So if they are within the company's secured network, that's fine. Also, it has to be during the regular working hours and have a current project requiring this information. So if you work in R&D, you have to be using the company's network, you have to be working during certain hours, and you have to be working on a certain project. So if the employee's role changes on the project or the project ends, their access can be dynamically updated or revoked based on the new conditions. It's a policy-based, and this is making sure that access rights are always aligned with the current operational need and security policies, not rule or role-based. It's dynamic. This is policy-based, enhancing both efficiency and security. We could also have risk-based access control. Risk-based tailored security measures to the level of risk associated with the access request, taking into account the sensitivity of the asset being accessed, the user's identity, the reasons why they need this, and the overall security risks involved in granting this access. So they would look at your identity. Who are you? How sensitive is this data? And they will make decision based on that. So this approach allows for more nuisance security position, applying stringent control for high-risk scenarios and more lenient measure for lower-risk situation. So if it's low-risk situation, they might give you access. High risk, they might stop it based on the risk. So by evaluating the context of each access, the risk-based ensure that security measures are proportional to the potential risk. So if you want to access the nuclear weapon, you're not going to be allowed to do so. If you want to access the gym, you might be able to do so. So those are extreme examples, enhancing security without unnecessarily hindering productivity. So you would access certain areas based on the riskiness of that asset, of that area, of that system. So for example, imagine an employee at a financial institution who need to access customer account information. Okay, that's sensitive. If an employee is working from the office, a lower risk scenario, they might only need to enter a password. However, if they're trying to access the same information from a public Wi-Fi, the system might require additional information such as fingerprint scan or temporary code, or altogether say you cannot access the customer record because you're on an unsecured public Wi-Fi. That's another option. So this ensures that sensitive information remains secure, especially in situations where the risk of unauthorized access is higher. Let's talk about access control lists, known as ACL, not audit command language like the software. ACLs are sets of rules that specify which users or system processes can access certain resources and what action they can perform with them, such as reading the resource, like if it's a document, editing, or executing files. And there are two main types of ACLs. We can set access control list on a file system, so basically giving you access to certain files, folders, or directory, which is also like a folder, but it's an old word for directory within an operating system. They can regulate what users can do with which specific files, such as opening, editing, or deleting them. Or we can set ACLs at a network level. They are used to control the flow of network traffic, dictating what type of data can pass through the network devices like routers and switches. Now they are not really, they function similar to a firewall, but they're not really firewalls. So they help improve the network performance by managing the data traffic flow efficiently. Again, as I mentioned, they regulate traffic similar to a firewall, but their primary concern is to manage access and permission for users and system. Firewalls, if you want to compare and contrast, remember, protect us against external threat by monitoring and filtering incoming and outgoing traffic. Now also we have stateful ACLs. Similar to firewall, which we also have stateful firewalls, they can track the state of the network connection. Basically, they look at the network connection and see if it's secured or not, to make more informed decision whether to allow or block traffic based on the connection history, inserting more specific information like IP addresses, how often this traffic is coming, at what time, so on and so forth. States folder, just like looking around for more information. For example, in a company, a file system ACL might be used to restrict access to sensitive project folder, because we're looking at files. We can do that. So only certain employees can edit these documents within it, while other only can read it. So this is an example of a file system ACL. A networking ACL, on the other hand, a networking ACL could be set up on the company's routers to block all inbound traffic from certain suspicious IP addresses, like sniffing those IP addresses. You can't go in, enhancing network security. So kind of think of it as an adjunct firewall. Let's take a look at this multiple choice question from farhatlectures.com. Which access control model is best suited for environment requiring high level of security, where access permission are not determined by user identity, but by a set of comprehensive rules? So a set of comprehensive rules. Okay, let's take a look at the answer choices. Is it discretionary access control? Well, what is discretionary access control? DAC, which is DAC. DAC allow users to manage their own access based on their own discretion. So if you own the data, you can let others have access to it or not. So is it DAC best suited for environment requiring high level of security? I don't think so. You don't want to give this discretion to any particular individual. Is it mandatory access control? Is it mandatory access control? Yes, mandatory access control is it's for high security level, where access is controlled by centralized authority based on classification level and security clearances, not individual. Okay, so this is based on a set of comprehensive rules. I would say I will keep B, and let's look at the other ones. Role-based access control. What is role-based access control? Role-based access control is based on roles. What is your role? And that's going to determine what you can access or not. So that's you cannot. Sometimes two individuals could have the same role, but one individual may not have security clearance for high level of, for top secret information. So it's not role-based. It's not role-based. Policy-based access control. Well, policy-based is kind of, it mixes both the role-based access control and the rule with the U based access control. It includes users, but also considered other factor. It's more flexible than MAC. MAC is, if you want MAC is because it's the highest level of security. When you have highest level of security, it's not determined by, it's not who you are, it's not by your role. Therefore, policy-based, some of it is role-based. It have nothing to do with role-based. You get the role out. Once you get the role out, policy-based is out. So when it comes to high security level, mandatory access control is the control that we are looking at, MAC. What should you do now? You want to go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs. That's going to help you if you're studying for your CPA exam. Invest in yourself. Good luck, study hard, and of course, stay safe.